It is my honor, privilege, and pleasure to introduce Mr. Hyatt Brown.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be here today. And Bernie Simpkins, were it not for you, lots of things in Brevard County would never have occurred or happened. Congratulations to you and your family. I'm honored to be here to be representing you. And so I would like to also recognize a gentleman here whose name is G.R. Cunningham, and his daddy and I were in the legislature together back a long time ago, 1972. And so he's been an entrepreneur here for a long time, and actually I've heard about it. I never saw him until right now, a little earlier, and he looks just like his father. So now I need to have a clicker. My presentation today is going to be divided into two parts. The first part has to do with Brown & Brown, and the second part has to do with some ideas, possibly new ideas, to inquiring minds. Now, is there anybody here who does not have an inquiring mind? If so, hold your hand up. A lot of inquiring minds. Very good. So let's talk about Brown & Brown. What is Brown & Brown? Brown & Brown is an insurance broker. You might call us an insurance agency. But what we basically do is we sell insurance on behalf of risk bearers, insurance companies like the Travelers, and we model those insurance policies, which are really the most complex contract that you'll ever enter into without the help of a lawyer. We model those to the exposures that are represented by personal assets, et cetera, or business assets, or eleemosynary assets, or colleges, whatever it is. We are the front line, and when the loss occurs, then we assist the client with getting the loss paid by the insurance company. We're not a risk bearer. And so with having said that, so you'll get a little brief idea of what we do. In the beginning, and there's always a beginning, Bernie was in the beginning, lots of other people. Gail was in the beginning. There were two men. And one of those, and this pointer is kind of hard to, that's my father, J. Adrian Brown, right here. The pointer doesn't show over. And that's his first cousin, C.C. Owen. And right down at the bottom, right there, that is a 1939 rendition of an air conditioner called a fan. Now, you all may not know about fans, but I grew up, I was 2 years old when we moved to Daytona from Orlando, and I remember about fans. My father was the manager for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in Orlando, and they wanted to promote him and send him to New York, and then he was going to have to go someplace else and be a leader someplace else. He didn't want to leave Florida. And so he came to my mother, and he said, we're going to go and move the family to Daytona Beach, and we're going to start a property and casualty insurance agency. 1937 that was. And so that's not a real good year to start in business. And so my mother said, wait a second. We have one son, he's 9. I'm not supposed to get pregnant. I'm pregnant. You're not going anyplace until I have this child and I live and the baby lives. So on the 12th of July at 7:10 a.m., I was born. At 7:15, my father was on his way to Daytona Beach to build his home for the family. And that home, now bear in mind, this is 1939. He didn't want to have a mortgage on his home because he'd been through the Depression. He'd seen all the bad times. And so he came over and built it with his own hands. He could do a lot of stuff along with some other hands. And when it got to right at the end, he had to borrow $2,000, which he paid off in about a year to complete the home. And that home, I grew up there. My brother grew up there. Mother and father died there. We inherited the home, and it is now Martini's Restaurant in South Daytona. And so I just happened to be there last Saturday night with some friends, and I ate dinner right adjacent to my old bedroom. I thought, a lot of things are going on. And so Let's fast forward. Now, in 1955, I went off to the University of Florida. My brother, older brother, Worley Brown, graduated from law school, came into the agency, and what was originally Brown and Owen became known as Brown and Brown. It was an equal partnership, it was split. And so in 1959, I came in to the agency and from Florida, and by 1961, I was, selling insurance. And actually, I worked in the agency during the summer when I was in college and sold insurance illegally. The statute of limitations were run, so you don't have to worry about that. And so it was fun. And so in 1961, three things happened simultaneously. Number one, my brother was appointed chairman of the Florida Industrial Commission by the then governor of Florida, Governor Ferris Bryant. He had to resign from Brown and Brown, moved to Tallahassee. My father said, I am 65. I have a little farm out in the country, got a little orange grove, got 3 horses, got some cows and a pig or two, and I'm going to enjoy life and I'm going to ride 3 days a week. And he said, I'm selling the agency to you. And so I bought the agency. Now, $61,000, that's annual revenue. We made $1,400. The reason they're plus and minus is we had a fiscal year of 331. I had to do a little interpolation with the old facts. And we had 8 teammates, including my mother and me. And so the bottom line is that I bought it for $75,000, had no money. It was a note, and I gave a note to my father, 10% interest for his lifetime and my mother's lifetime, and I inherited the note in 1980 when my mother passed away. And so I was thinking to myself as we're riding down there, I wonder what I was thinking about in 1961 when all of a sudden I owed $75,000 and we had 8 people who had to grow the agency and we only made $1,400. And if you're gonna run a business that is 97% people and 3% cash, how are you going to attract people who are good to a business that small? And the answer is you got to grow the damn business. And you got to grow it, and you grow it through salespeople. Salespeople run the world if they're a leader. Not all salespeople are leaders, but all leaders are salespeople. They got to sell an idea. They got to sell a product. They've got to garner the interests of the people and know that the people that work for the organization can depend upon that leader. Lots of responsibilities for a leader. So anyway, I was off to the races, and by 1966, that would be about 5 years, we had 14 or 15 people. And if you look at these, and let's see if I can get this to work, that's your old dad right there, me. And that is Joanne Penny. And so everybody else is dead. Joanne Penny was only, I think, 22 or 23. And so Joanne started as a CSR, customer service representative, which is the entry level. She moved up to be a producer and became very successful as producer. She participated in the stock ownership plans, and she retired about 8 years ago, and her husband retired, and they're traveling the world. They're really enjoying life. And so it's really pleasing to me to know of the number of people who, over a long period of time, who bet on us and have done very, very well. Now, this is 1972. In 1972, and this is the Business Insurance publication, they rank agencies, insurance brokerages once a year. We're, I think, 6th in the world now. The new stuff comes out, and the new rankings will come out in July. Maybe we're 5th. I'm not sure about that. But if you'll look at this, Marsh McLennan, 9 out of 10 are gone. Only 1 left. Now, you'll notice down here at the bottom, there's Brown & Brown. We did have $345,000 in revenue. Well, this is a strange pointer. And it says that we were the 11,381 agency in the United States when there were about 40,000 agencies. I had no idea. That was a scientific wild-ass guess. I had no idea how big we were. But it sounded good, and no one ever questioned it because they didn't have any basis for questioning. The reason that all of those went away is too whole. Number one, they made two big mistakes. It generally takes two big mistakes to wipe out a leadership. And the second reason is because the leader lost the will to lead. And when the leader loses the will to lead, and maybe they've got several different ideas about why, it'll be sold. And so then all of a sudden there is a change, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, in 1980, I had gotten out of the legislature. In the last 2 years of the legislature, I served as speaker. And so I really, in 1972, someone dared me to run for the legislature, and in just 30 seconds, I took the challenge and ran and won by 325 votes. So it wasn't a landslide. I was not overwhelmingly popular, I guess. And as a matter of fact, but you know, there were a lot of people in Volusia County who there must have been fraud. And the reason that I think there was fraud is because I never ran into anybody who didn't vote for me. And most of the people didn't vote for me. So we sat down, and there were 8 people, a little group of senior leaders, and we said, what are we going to do? We were going to be real strategic. We're going to be real smart. And the answer is we decided that we wanted to double the revenues in 2 years with all organic, no acquisitions. And so in 1980, we had $2 million in revenue. And the reason that we'd continue to grow, even because I was in the legislature, is because we had brought on board some really good people. And even though we didn't grow as fast as we had, we were growing, and they took care of the balance sheet. And so we made 16%, $320,000. That was pretty good for those days. Not good for today, but good for those days. And so in 1982, we had double the revenue. And so, but 8% margin, we made $320,000. We had worked our butts off, and the same amount of money. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist. I know there are some maybe in the audience or across the river over here. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out we're not doing something right. And so we decided for the first time to call in a consultant, and we did, and the guy was really good, and he said, I can tell you what I can do. I will look at you, and I'll make a recommendation, and if you follow my recommendations, you will be able to grow organically, and you will be able, not as fast as you have, and you will be able to have a 25% operating margin, which almost nobody has, but if you follow it, I don't know whether you can or not. So I'm doing this consulting, and I'll tell you then. So 3 days later, he came to us, and he got our group together, and he said, y'all are great salespeople, but you don't know your ass from third base about how to make money in this business. And so that would make some people mad. Didn't make us mad because he was right. And so we took his model and adopted it and added a couple little twists. And that's the operating model that has allowed us to go from that level to where we are today. And it is spread across our business. Our business is a lot more complex, and I'm not going to get into that, than it was. Now, in the meeting, we had a meeting when we got through all these changes back in 1983, because the first 2 years is 81, 82. And so a lady in the group, and there had been some reduction in force and some other things, a lady got up and said, listen, is this the last time that we're ever going to have a change? And I said, no, this is not the last time we're going to have a change. We're going to change every time it is needed and necessary in order to safeguard the future of you and everybody in our company. And if you can't stand that, you need to resign right now. 25 years later, she retired, and and you'll see the employee stock purchase plan. She's done very well, and she also is traveling the world. So change is coming about even more rapidly today. And you'd say, well, where in that sheet? What does that mean? Well, in 1980, we hired a young woman named Linda Downs, and she wanted to start an agency in Orlando. Now, 1980, a woman, 27 years old, starting an agency from scratch. And in Orlando, they didn't know Brown & Brown from Adam's house cat. And so we said, okay, We'll do it. We'll finance it. And so she ultimately became the executive vice president of Brown & Brown and retired about 3 years ago, and she's traveling the world. And so, but she brought to us some qualities that were unbelievable, and the people that she influenced in our business have all done very, very well. And so she called me one day and said, I've got a poem that represents Brown & Brown and what we're trying to do, and I'm going to send it to you. I think we ought to adopt the cheetah as our animal, corporate animal, because it's the fastest animal in the world, land animal. And in addition to that, we need a corporate animal. I thought, well, okay. And so she sent this poem, and the poem is as follows. In the morning in Africa, a cheetah wakes, knowing that it will have to run faster than the slowest gazelle or it will starve. In the morning in Africa, the gazelle awakes, knowing that it will have to run faster than the fastest cheetah or it will die. In the morning, when you get up, be you a cheetah or a gazelle, you better be running. Sounds kind of harsh. It ain't. It's like any athletic team. You get up in the morning and you go do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it. And if you are one who can last a long time, you do very well. And so the blue-eyed cheetah, that's our trademark cheetah because there aren't any blue-eyed cheetahs in the world. We actually sponsor Brown & Brown in a small way, 2 cheetah conservatories, one in South Africa and one in Namibia, and my wife and I have been there. And we actually have a baby cheetah in Namibia that is named Linda, like Linda Downs. Kind of interesting. She was very impressed. We had a strategic plan in 1983, and it was fairly simple. All these things are about growing. You got to grow, and you got to bring in people, and you got to grow, you got to bring in people. And so we wanted hopefully to grow 25% a year. If so, on 1/1 of 90, it would have been 19 million. And our aspirational was to grow revenues by 33%. If so, it would have been 29.5, and grow the operating profit at 25%. How do we achieve? We take this model and we use it, and we use it, and you have to have the discipline. And later, when we talk about some challenging thoughts, we're going to talk about discipline. And so we followed. And in 1990, we had 25.5 million revenue, so that was about a 28 or 29% combined, actually compounded, and the operating profit was almost 25%. So we did pretty doggone well. We were kind of happy with ourselves. Now, at that juncture, we had always wanted people who were pushing the boat down the stream or up the stream, as you might want to look at it. We wanted them to be shareholders. And so over a period of time, we had about 25 or 26 shareholders. We actually operated like a public company. We had an annual meeting of shareholders. We published all of the information about profit and loss. We basically had an equation that set the price of the stock, and so if anybody left, then we would buy the stock back. No one wanted to leave, but in 1980, when we started, a man came to us and said, I want to join Brown & Brown, and I want you to buy my agency, and I want your stock. And I thought, privately owned company, little organization, and he wants our stock? And so we said, okay, if so, he said, yeah, but I want to put. Now, what that means is that it's a contractual obligation, so at a later time, he can put the stock to us, and we have to buy it. And we would buy it at the price that the equation at that time showed the value of the stock. And we said, okay, we'll do that. But because this equation is based on growth, and we're going to grow, we want 10 years to pay you off. We'll pay you off 10% a year for 10 years at no interest. And he said, okay, I'll do that. And so in 1989, Pete Thomas had a heart attack. And so it was not a real bad one, but it scared him to death. And he said, I'm putting the stock. And so the stock, when we gave it to him in 1980, was about $700,000. In 1993, it was $9.3 million. So he did pretty good for a country boy. And so all of a sudden, we started thinking, yes, we have the capital and surplus to buy that off, but then is that going to work? And is that going to substantially decrease our ability to grow? Because growth is the mantra. And the answer is no. And so to solve that problem, I bought the stock. And then what I did was distribute it among people that were on the way up and I thought they needed to be part of the rock. And so there were about 30 people, and they had the same terms and conditions, 1/10 a year, 1/10 a year. And so needless to say, and you'll see in a moment, those people have done exceptionally well. And so, but we still hadn't solved the problem. What about all of the other people? And so we did a year and a half of looking at all different kinds of opportunities. An ESOP was something that we were recommended by a bunch of very intelligent people. And ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan, if you ever hear one of those, say, oh my God, no. It is a snaring delusion. I'm not going to get into the details. We didn't do it. A lot of my friends have, and they didn't get along well, unless they were the owner initially, because it's the original leverage buyout plan. So anyway, we hadn't, and then all of a sudden, what happened? We had a 5-year operating plan. We still didn't know about the shareholder buyout. And then there was a big surprise. We merged with a publicly owned company. So therefore, all shareholders would be shareholders in a publicly owned company. And how did this happen? A friend of mine, fraternity brother, Bone Associates, a publicly owned broker in Tampa, and they made 2 big mistakes. And what happens when the second mistake is made, the teammates start to question the leader's capacity. And when that occurs, the birds start to fly the coop. And so Bill Poe came to me and said, look, it'll look like we're buying you, we're bigger than you, but you'll be the largest shareholder, you'll control the board. And so we said, okay, we're going to look at it. So we did look very carefully. Make a long story short, we found a $6 million hole in their balance sheet. And we said, if we do this, day one, before, you're going to announce it to the public and hit the balance sheet for $6 million. What we didn't know was that that hidden liability, which was not on the balance sheet, was really about $13 million. And the difference between 6 and 13, the good thing about it, it wasn't right now. It was like blood running down your leg, a little and a little over 8 or 9 years. So it really didn't affect us, but if we hadn't been in great financial shape and growing, it would have affected us. So anyway, we did it. They were at $52 million in revenue, publicly owned, centralized. All the decisions were made in Tampa. And we were decentralized, and all the decisions were made, except for the seniorest kinds of things, were made at the profit center. All the operating decisions, once you adopted the model. And so we were at $33 million. They had, we were bigger than they in Florida business, but they had 7 offices outside of Florida. And so the market capitalization. Now, market capitalization is when you take the number of shares outstanding and you multiply it times the cost or the price in the open market. That's the value of the company. It's called market capitalization. So in 1993, the combined was $135 million. And Bill Poe said to me, the only thing I want you to do is in the future, when I pull the trigger, I want you to go on the road and sell the stock. And so the stock at that time was $12 a share. It got to $21 a share. He pulled the trigger. I went on the road and sold all of their family ownership for $22, and they were happy as a clam and went away. Now here is from 1993 on. Now you'll notice here, and this is very, very important. You'll notice here, 8 million, and it's 400 million. And so you see it up, and then da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And what happened then? 2007, the Great Recession. And so why did this go down? Because we were selling a lot of insurance. We had a whole bunch of people went broke. And if you've got a business you're insuring and they go broke, your commission goes zero. And then what about the ones that survive because their business shrank? What happens there? Income goes down. And so even in the worst recession, the worst possible recession since 1929, you can see the insurance business is very interesting. To have life, you have to have air, you have to have water, you have to have food, you got to have a place to live, and then you got to have insurance. So it's necessary for life. So we've got the greatest business in the history of the world. And so it works, but you got to work it. And so here is the real measure of how you're running a business. It's cash flow. And I have a friend who said that's how much money you have left over in the shoebox at the end of the year. And so in 1993, we had 21 million, and we had 678 million this last year. So, and one day it'll be $1 billion, and then on from there. Now, let's hear something you might want to, let's see if I can back this thing up. Okay, now if you look here, and you'd say, okay, this number here, that's $400 million. That's how much we made after tax. So where'd the rest of that money come from? Well, here's the situation. In our business, when we buy a business and we buy the assets of the business, we can write off most of that acquisition price against taxes over 15 years. That's where the difference comes from, the savings and taxes. Now, here was the final decision that brought us across the finish line to become publicly owned. This was what I had been looking for 10 years. How do we get a system in place where the people in the company who are helping to push the boat down the stream or up the stream, how can we give them the opportunity to own a piece of the rock? And so this is called employee stock purchase plan. Let me tell you how it works. Pretty damn simple. On 8/1 of each year, the value of the stock in the open market is X. And if you want to buy into this program, you can have it payroll deducted over the next 12 months. And so you take the value of the stock on 8/1 and the value of the stock on 7/31, 12 months later, and you get to buy it for 85%, 15% discount, of the lower of the two. So let's say it's $20 on 8/1 and it's $25 on 7/31. You get to buy it for 85% of 20. And suppose it dropped to 15. You get to buy it for 85% of 15. That's pretty damn good. And you can sell it the next day as public company stock. Now, if you sell it the next day, then you will have to pay personal income tax. You wait 12 months, and you can pay capital gains. So, but people who are on the team understand where we're going, and so we have there are approximately 10,500 teammates across the system today, and I think somewhere around 6,000 and 7,000 are in this plan. Now, let me show you how the thing worked in actual time. In 2010, if you had invested $50 pay period, and that's $1,300 annually, you would have put in 10 years, $13,000, and the value of the stock would be $51,255. So if you think about $50 a pay period, suppose you put $100 a pay period, it'd be worth over $100, and $200 a pay, et cetera. The max is $21,250 that you can invest. That's IRS. So this is a really good thing for all of our people. Now, the other reason that the stock has gone up is because the market has recognized our progress, and they've recognized the multiple that we sustain in terms of earnings. So when we merged with Poe & Associates in 1993, the market cap was 135 million. It's now 13.5 billion. That ain't too bad. And so everybody has had the opportunity since really 1993 to be part of the growth. Now, let's talk about some things that now are important. Ocracy. Anybody in here of Greek descent? Anybody, is there a Greek in here? No Greeks. Well, ocracy is a Greek word. It means rule of being first. And so merit, that's an English word. It means worthy. And so rule of the worthy. Brown & Brown is a meritocracy. It doesn't matter what your name is, what your race, religion, creed. If you can put your shoulder to the wheel and you can help us go upstream, by golly, you've got a place and you're going to grow. Now, originally, this was an American meritocracy. I invented it. And so in 2005 or 6, we opened an office in London, just a stone's throw, about 100 yards from Lloyd's of London, as a broker. So the bottom line is, I went over to, after we'd been in business for about 6 months, I went over to meet all the people, and I took my wife with me, and we walked in the front door, and here is this medallion, great big medallion. It says an American meritocracy, and I thought, oh my God, they're still pissed off at us for beating them in the Revolutionary War. And so, by golly, I went in, met everybody, we had a meeting, talked about Brown & Brown, and I said, we're changing this. This is going to be a meritocracy. And that's how that happened. Now, this is really interesting for you all students. And you need to take heed of this. 30%, according to national statistics, of the students in this room, assuming you're representative of a student population, are suffering from a degree of anxiety or depression. And there's a reason. And so in 2009, when I became chairman and no longer CEO, and Powell Brown, our eldest son, took over as CEO, I started thinking, what can I do to help the people that are in our organization, and particularly the younger people? Because by the time you get to be 45, you're kind of baked. Now, you can change, but you're kind of baked. And so I wake up 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, the way that you think about lots of good things and get good ideas is you inundate yourself with data, and your mind is like a computer. That's part of the reason for stress and part of the reason for anxiety. Your mind is like a computer, and all of a sudden, if you can turn it off, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up thinking about a lot of good things. And so I woke up at 3 o'clock one morning, about a year after I'd moved aside, and I got up, because when you do this, you better get up and write it down or else you'll forget it. And so I got up and started tracing this, and this is called the goalpost of life. And it's to measure your happiness index. Now, this is just me. This is not scientific, but it's me after, 50 years of working day, night, and Sunday. And so there are 4 cornerstones: family, security. That doesn't mean money. It means basically how you feel about yourself. And then you've got health, and you've got discipline. And so you can measure your happiness index. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But I want to talk to you about the cornerstones. Family, well, if you're married, it's your spouse, it's your children, it's your aunts, your aunt, whoever it is. If you're not married, then it's all, who is your family? You know that. And then what about security? Well, how do you feel about yourself? Are you feeling good? Do you feel like you want to get up in the morning and go do something? And so what about health? Every single person in here has a gene that gives you a health problem. I have one, and I'll tell you what it is. Migraine headaches. Anybody in here ever had a migraine headache? They hurt like hell, don't they? Okay, well, as a little boy, when I went to the beach with my mother and father and brother, I always came home with a headache. Bright light is a trigger. And so I couldn't figure out why in the hell are all those people thinking about so much fun, and I've got this god-awful headache. Long story short, I would have one maybe every 3 or 4 months and whatnot, and sometimes I'd vomit and it would go away. And so then I got into college, and so then I realized there's another trigger, whiskey. Alcohol is a trigger if you got the wrong gene. And so, but in those days when you're young and you get this god-awful pain, particularly if you got a date that likes to drink, then you're going to drink. And the pain is, forget that. Make a long story short on all that is, by the time I got into business, I was having one of these every once in a while. And then when the stress really got going and we had to work day, night, and Sunday, then about once every 2 months, I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a pain from here to here that hurt like hell. And if 10 is comatose and 1 is no pain, it would be a 7 to 8. And I had to get up because I always was at the office at 7, or if we're on the road, I was at 7 in a meeting. And I knew that I was going to have to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, even though. And by 4 o'clock, it would go downhill. And so I finally went to a doctor, and the doctor says, well, I don't know much about migraines, but I looked in this book, and he says, here's something that might help you. It's called Caffergon, and that means each pill is 100 milligrams of caffeine, 1 milligram of ergotamine. Ergotamine is a smooth muscle relaxer, and it will constrict your blood vessels. And so he said, when you have one of these at 3 o'clock in the morning, get up, take a pill, sit in a dark room, sit in a chair, take another pill in 30 minutes, and maybe it'll work. Well, by golly, it worked. And by 7 o'clock, when I got ready to go to, when I arrived at the office, I was down to a 1 and it was gone. Well, that was once every month. And then it was once a week. And then it was 3 times a week and 4 times a week. And then I was reading, and I was on the road constantly. From 1980, I took care of all of our offices. I was responsible for all the offices outside of Florida. And when you get up in an airplane, if you have problems, that was a problem with a headache. But I was reading this article about ergotamine, and the problem with this fact that it shrinks your blood vessels is, the article said, you will get blood clots, and particularly in your legs, and particularly if you sit a lot, and particularly if you're on airplanes, and you may die. So I thought, I believe I better do something. And so, make a long story short, I went to a special headache clinic in Chicago, and if anybody wants to know about it, I'll be glad to tell you about it later. And they gave me a non-narcotic, and it worked. But the doctor says, you are a drug addict. And I said, bullshit. And so he said, you can't get off of this because the pain will be too intense, and we're going to put you in the hospital. Hospital is next door. And I said, nope, going home. So I got, Cece was with me, my wife, and so we went home. And that was a Wednesday. And so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And Wednesday, I was in a dark room with a night pack. And I can tell you, I think I know what a drug addict has to deal with. And all of a sudden it broke. And so 2 weeks later, I was back. They prescribed a non-narcotic, and it worked. So now, let me tell you something else you got to look about. All you sun lovers, skin cancer. There's the dark mole. That's what you don't want. That will kill you. So if you think about then, wrong way. If you think about discipline, we've been talking about that. So I want you to think for a moment. If you, and this is on mine, we're going to have a show of hands. If you were going to say, family, security, health, or discipline, which of those cornerstones are the most important? Now, I'm going to give you 15 seconds. No, wait a second. We're going to, 15 seconds. You got to think about it. Think. These are inquiring minds. Everybody said you were inquiring minds, so I know you are. Okay, how many people think it's health? Hands up. Okay, how many people think it is family? Hands up. Okay, how many people think it's security? Hands up. How many people think it's discipline? It is discipline, period. If you're not disciplined, you cannot have good health, you cannot be secure, and you cannot have a good family. Pretty simple. Life is simple. We make it complex. This is a iconic sign that hangs in every one of our offices. And as an individual and as a business, if you don't have integrity, you are nothing. And I want to tell you something that I learned that you will find interesting about the word integrity. We recruit a lot of young people, and this was a group of athletes, male and female, and one was from Germany, one was from Finland, one was from Spain, 3 were from the United States, and 1 was from Taiwan. And so we started talking about integrity because this hangs in all of our offices. And so I asked the German guy, what is the German word for integrity? And he told me, and it sounds something like, because that's in English, the English language is a derivative. And so then the guy from Finland, hell, I couldn't even understand what he was saying. And I noticed this Taiwanese gal who was very nervous. And I said, what's the Chinese word for integrity? There is none. My wife and I have been to China 3 times. Wouldn't want to go right now. And we have each time had a car and a driver because we were there for a couple of weeks, and a guide. And the requisite is the guide has to have at least a master's in political science, archaeology, history, or something. They have to be an intelligent, schooled person. And we ask each of them, what's the Chinese word for integrity? We don't have one. That gives you a little thinking, particularly in terms of what's going on today. I want to read this. The character that takes command in moments of critical choices has already been determined. It has been determined by 1,000 other choices already made earlier on seemingly unimportant moments. It has been determined by all those little choices of years past, by those times when the voice of conscience was at war with the voice of temptation, whispering a lie. It doesn't really matter. It has been determined by all the day-to-day decisions made when life seemed easy and crises seemed far away, the decisions that piece by piece, bit by bit, developed habits of discipline or of laziness, habits of self-sacrifice or self-indulgence, habits of duty and honor and integrity, or dishonor and shame. We try and build knowledge and professionalism at Brown & Brown. When young people come into our organization, and people that are not so young, they don't know our business, and our idea is to elevate them. And so we have Brown & Brown University, one in Daytona, one in Orlando, one in Charleston, South Carolina. We have mentors, we have continuing education, we have professional designations that we will give you money in return. In other words, it costs money to get the designations. We'll pay it back if you get it. We have 303 profit centers across 43 states. We're licensed in all 50. And then, of course, we're in Bermuda and London and Canada. Now, this is the joker in the deck for everyone in here today. This is the S&P 500 index of the stock market since 1996. How many people know how many points the market went down yesterday? 1,000. Yeah, got you a little bit of attention. That's only 2.5%. That ain't much when you think about this. So now let me talk about this. Right here, 1996. Bleep, 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 bleep. Up 106%, and then down 49%. Then in 2001, up 101%, then down 57%. This is the big recession here. And then up, and it's now over 300%. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. How does that affect the people in this room? How does it affect Eastern Florida State University? Probably not that much Eastern Florida State University, but it will affect families, particularly if they're in a not a very good financial position, and if they're leveraged, and if they're margined, and all that sort of thing. But the point is, and this is something we preach to our people, The Brown & Brown stock has a 0.63 beta. That means it's less volatile than the average. So that means the going down probably is not as much, but it's going to go down. So just because you think you've got a bunch of money today, you might have half as much. But if it's all paid for, you still got half. And there's a bunch of other people who have nothing. And so life is a long-distance road race. All you all are starting. So if you think about where you are today, where do you want to be when you're 65? Hard to think about when you're this young. This is our new world headquarters. It's being constructed. We'll habitate it. This is in Daytona Beach. It's down on Beach Street downtown. We'll have initially about 1,100 people in the building. And we're bringing profit centers from elsewhere because it's very profitable for us to have profit centers that are not dependent upon geography to come to Daytona or Florida because the cost of doing business here is so much less. California is ungodly. The second worst state from taxes is Pennsylvania and New York and so on and so forth. And so I've got two quotes that I want to leave you with. And I have a little conference room, and I have quotes that have been important to me when I see them through the last 50 years. And this one is on the plains of hesitation. Bleach the bones of countless millions, who, at the dawn of victory, sat down to wait, and waiting died. That's not leaving you with a very good feel. So I'm going to leave you with a good feel. The point is, don't be afraid to make a considered decision. Make it and go on. Now, you're going to make some mistakes. Fix them. Don't hang with a mistake because you feel obligated. Fix them and move on. The 30th president of the United States was Calvin Coolidge. There is a term, taciturn. It's an adjective, and it means a quiet person. They are not very talkative. And Calvin Coolidge was one of those people. And so he was born and reared in a small town in western Massachusetts, Northampton. My wife was born and reared in Whately, which is 12 miles north. It's a town of 1,300. So I know a little bit about the geography. And so he went to college and became a lawyer, and he then, he was not very communicative. He was quiet. But he ran for mayor, and he was elected. Then he did a good job, and he ran for the state senate, and he was elected. Then he ran for being president of the Senate, and he was elected. And then he ran for governor of Massachusetts, he was elected. And then, under Warren Harding, he was vice president of the United States. And Warren Harding died in office after 2 years from an illness. He became president of the United States. He then ran and was elected president of the United States. In 1927, he called a press conference. And everybody thought that he was going to run for re-election. And he came in, and he stood behind a rostrum, and he said, "I'm here to tell you today that I'm not going to run for re-election," and walked off. That's the definition of taciturn. But here's a quote. Persistence. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than an unsuccessful man with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Only persistence and determination are omnipotent. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Be glad to answer any questions. Okay. Okay, from your intro, I heard you remember what is the importance of being involved in clubs. That's where you make contacts. You are going to be going down the path of life. You need to have contacts. And some of them you're going to like, some of them you're not going to like. The ones you don't like, don't fiddle with them. Don't get into a confrontation. Great leaders are born and good leaders are made. How do you develop leadership skills? You do it by trying. You do it by reading. You do it by reading people. And then not everybody wants to be a leader. So if you don't want to be a leader, then you got to be a follower. And so frankly, a really good follower can be a great leader because they understand what people want and are looking for. What made you trust the consultant? And you know, it's kind of interesting. I gave this speech once before, and that was the first question. What made you trust the consultant? And the answer was, he made total sense. He also had an insurance agency in upstate or in Michigan that he put on this system, and he showed us the numbers, and it worked. Why do people say change is hard? Well, it's because people resist change, particularly as you get older. I don't want to change, hell no. You know, I do have a cell phone. What do you look for in a new hire? Do you have hire a new college grad? Yes. What types of degrees? Anything. What do you need? Do you need a 4-year degree? No. But here is the bottom line. If you do not have a 4-year degree and you get into the workplace, it might be beneficial for you to try to acquire in the next 2 years. And here's the reason. To do that shows discipline and determination, and you will learn something. Inundate yourself with ideas. How do you think starting a company has changed since the past? Do you think it would be easier or more difficult to start from scratch in 2020? There's more opportunity today than there's ever been. Here is the bottom line, though, on that. You've got to be willing to dwell in the cellar for a long time in any business. You got to be willing to give up. And if you want to live in a big-ass house on the river, then it's going to be a long ways, if ever. You got to keep that money in the business. And so if you're not willing to do that, so what? What makes your model more successful than others? Because it is very disciplined and it's also weighing and measuring. We have 303, I'm just using the offices in the United States, maybe have 305. Every one of those offices has a budget. Every one of the offices has departments. There are generally 5 or 6 departments. Every one of those departments has a leader. Every one of those leaders has a budget, and we measure them every month. If you can't measure something, you can't accomplish. What is the ultimate goal for your company? Well, I don't know, we're going to run it out the top. It would be nice to be number one day. That'd be a while, and maybe so. But we'll see. It all works out. And what is your turnover rate? In the companies that have been with us for a long time, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 to 14%. The real question, though, is what is the turnover rate for people who have been with you more than 5 years? And that's somewhere around 6 to 7%. The turnover rate in a company with 10,500 people there's going to be a certain amount of people that are going to be moving just because that's the way the United States is today. And so what we'd like to do is get our overall, because it costs money, among other things, we'd like to get our overall turnover rate down to about 14%. Besides Sheeta, does Brown & Brown have a corporate philanthropy? Yes, we do a lot of things. Every one of our profit centers is charged to get into the community and get involved in eleemosynary organizations, charitables, alcohol and drug abuse, for children, humane society, you know, on and on and on. If you looked at our annual report, you'd see some of this, but every single office in their budget, in part of the budget, is contributions to. What is the best carrier advice? What is the best carrier advice you ever see?
Career, I think it believes.
Okay, that's career. Well, somebody doesn't know how to spell. You need a little spelling in here. Well, I grew up where you got to work. And, you know, I had to work on a farm. My father had a little farm. I had to work 6 days in the summer. And I tell you, you don't want to be a farmer. And it was out on Spruce Creek, and, you know, it's hot as hell in the summertime. But my father always said, if you work and you can understand people around you, then you ought to be able to lead. Oh, okay, they got to go to class? All right. What 2 mistakes? Well, that would take a long time to explain. They're not immoral or illegal. They're just tactical. What are the steps to become an insurance agency owner? Well, you got to have the ability to sell insurance. And is your business an organic growth or through? Okay, our organic growth, depending on where you are, is 4 to 8%, and the rest is acquisitions. And we've made a huge number of acquisitions over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was riveting, actually. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time. So EFSC students, stay seated. Let's give Mr. Brown another round of applause and have a wonderful day.